Hey everybody, I'm Stacy Koprince from Manhattan Prep.
And I'm Chris Gentry, also from Manhattan Prep.
We're super excited to be here with you today to talk about getting ready for the math-based side of your GMAT studies. This is the third installment of our series for getting ready, building your study plan in general for the GMAT. If you missed us in the first two, you can check out those links in the description. If you're watching us later, definitely start with those and come back to us here. I just want to tease a little something we're going to talk about today because it's the thing I'm the most excited about talking about. The two biggest things I hear from students are, I'm a math person. Like I have a degree in STEM, I'm an engineer, whatever, but I'm really struggling to get a high score on the quant and DI sections of this test. What is going on? And the flip side is I also hear, I'm not a math person. I'm really nervous about taking this test. So how am I going to get a good GMAT score if I'm not a math person? By the way, if either of these categories describe you, drop math or not math in the chat right now to let us know.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to find out what our audience is feeling on that.
Exactly, which one you identify with. And if you're watching us later, tell us in the comment section. We're going to address both of those scenarios today. We're also going to, we're going to talk about 5 major tips, things that you need to keep in mind as you get ready for the math-based portions of this exam. And then we're going to finish with the 3 phases of your studies and basically what to focus on or concentrate on during those 3 phases. So that's our plan for the day. Let us know in the chat, math, non-math, where are you on the spectrum? All right, let's dive into our first one. Chris, what would you say are the most important math-based skills for the GMAT?
It's interesting because that has actually changed in the last couple of years. I used to really not focus a lot on being able to do quick calculations with relatively large awkward numbers. But I think that right now, with the way the test is running, especially in the quantitative section where you don't have a calculator, the ability to say, for example, to look at 210 divided by 35 and being able to reduce that down quickly and go, oh, okay, well, here's the decimal equivalent of that. That is something that has become more important. So I got to put some quick calculation ideas on that. That one's for me. And then also just there are 3 areas that I see on the GMAT where I'm still seeing, and I personally would run and do a lot of algebra as opposed to just like number crunching and quick calculation. Exponents and quadratics. Somewhat absolute values, but exponents and quadratics, you've got to have the math-based rules for those 2 topics just completely ironclad.
And I'll say, in my opinion, exponents are more frequent and therefore more important on that spectrum. Quadratics, yeah, you'll probably see a quadratic, but unless you're looking for a super high math score, you could get away with not knowing that or just letting that one go. So I kind of think about this one, Chris, as there are topics and there are skills. And those are like 2 different things that we need to pay attention to on the math-based side. So on the topic side, there's like actual, like you need to know statistics. You need to know, like there are certain facts and rules that you need to know. In your opinion, what are the biggest topics, the most frequently tested topics, essentially, on both math, quant and DI for the math-based stuff?
Oh, goodness. Topics, what I see a lot of, especially recently, is actually variations on building out a story problem from some type of economic perspective, like a profit revenue cost idea, or like
a business story. Yeah.
So something like that. I'm seeing that a lot, and being able to look at that and say, okay, I've got stage 1 and stage 2, or something like this business changed its profit percentage by increasing the selling price of a product. And you're like, okay, I need to be able to build out both of those stages and translate that really quickly. So the ability to set up that story into a mathematics framework, that's a skill that I'm seeing a lot of.
That's one of the 2 that I had on my list as like the biggest topics that we have to pay attention to on the GMAT. So fully agree with you there. And I'll add a little more detail there in terms of the kinds of things they tend to be testing. So as Chris said, what I'm going to call like, there are equations that they expect you to know that are so basic. It's like you need to know what a profit equation, you need to know profit equals revenue minus cost. You just need to know these basic equations and how to work with them in a story. There's also a lot of stuff around percents, fractions, ratios, being able to move among those and just kind of basic numbers. Probability can come in. You may have to also translate to an actual equation, like take a sentence or a bit of a story and be able to write equations from it, that kind of thing. The other one that I had on my list, Chris, was just stats in general. So especially the new version of the GMAT with the data insight section now being a part of your total score and actually equally weighted with the quant section in your total score.
Second, Stacy, sorry. Yeah. A moment ago, I think what you said was probability will come in. Did you mean what probably will come in?
Oh, sorry. No, I meant that probability can still come in. So
Yeah.
on both
Okay.
quant and DI, like the topic of
Yeah.
probability. Yeah. I will add there, by the way, a lot of people really stress out about, people will link probability and combinatorics and study the two of them equally. And that, I think, is a mistake. Combinatorics are just not worth the time on the test, given the low frequency with which they show up. People really stress about those. But like, if you hate combinatorics, just, you're going to get one, let it go, whatever.
Yeah.
But stats, and not just the basic stats anymore. Yeah, you got to know average and, median and all of that kind of stuff. But because data insights is so important now, you got to make sure that you're locked in on weighted average, correlation, standard deviation. All of that stuff is absolutely going to show up in the DI section.
That's actually, yeah, I was thinking primarily about the quantitative section right now, but you're absolutely right. I hadn't even thought, they love to do those interesting little correlation kind of ideas when you got like the tables questions and stuff like that. And the number of weighted average style questions in data sufficiency and in two parts that I see, that's pretty intense.
It's all over the place. And tell us in the chat, everyone, what are the biggest challenges that you're facing in math? What are the topic areas that you're most concerned about? And while you do that, I'm going to also just talk about skills. So we've been talking about the specific topics you need to know. The single biggest skill, and this is going to start to get into our teaser earlier about, like, I'm a math person, how come this test is so hard for me? It's quantitative reasoning. Like, the quant section is actually called quantitative reasoning. And there's a reason for that. This is not your old school math test. This is not like number crunch and whatever. You actually have to be able to think about the math logically. You have to think about the theory behind it to be able to set these questions up and solve them. Chris, when you are working with a new student who's just getting used to the GMAT and getting used to this idea of, like, what does quantitative reasoning mean? What do you tell them?
Oh, so I work a lot with quantitative reasoning in terms of recognizing when you can build some type of estimation or some type of benchmarking. Like actually, Apor has mentioned I have struggles in work time problems. Work time problems is one of my favorite spots just to, like, have a benchmarking, sort of a sanity check on your result. Like, if person X does the job in 2 hours and person Y does the job in 10 hours, and you put them together, person X is so much faster. So the final result of the time is going to be pretty close to person X's time, because what they're doing is the most important contributing factor getting that job done. So just having to benchmark to say, okay, it's going to be close to person X's time, relatively speaking. And just having to get that as sort of a benchmark skill right there.
Yeah, for sure.
So that's something, yeah.
For sure. And I'm seeing the comment come in too about time management. I think we all struggle with time management. I certainly do on this test. And I think part of what we're talking about is actually going to address, it's going to make you faster. So Chris mentioned estimating or eyeballing, especially in the DI section, being able to test cases or test real numbers or use the answer choices working backwards in the problem, any of that kind of stuff. It's the quick and dirty approach. And it's faster once you learn how to do it. You got to learn how to do it first, but it's faster than sort of the textbook traditional old school approach. And you're going to make fewer mistakes that way. A, because doing it the textbook old school way is just harder. And B, because the way that the test is written, they will set up the common mistakes in the answer choices based on the old school, like the algebra or the textbook way to do it. So if you're just not even doing it that way in the first place, then you're a lot less likely to get caught up in the traps that they're setting for us. Super important. All right, anything else to add? Anybody else have any questions about the math skills, any other math skills that you're struggling with? And Chris, do you have anything to add on these topics?
Actually, yeah, because you mentioned something just a moment ago, and I realized that the amount of times that I talk with students who they look at a data sufficiency question, and they're like, it's a data sufficiency question where testing cases would be probably the most efficient way to do it. And their response is, but what case do I test first? Like, how do I even know what to try first? And how many of those are built around this idea of recognizing that the opportunity to test a minimum case and a maximum case as like your first two options, and using that as a judgment on whether it's going to be sufficient or not sufficient? That's something that shows up a lot for me.
I love that. Think about a minimum case and a maximum case. The other one that I like to think about is what's a normal case and a weird case.
Mm-hmm.
So a normal case might be like, I try 3, and a weird case might be, I try 1/3, or I try -1/3, or I try some other number that's weird but still allowed given whatever the rules are that they gave me in the question.
Or like you mentioned statistics a second ago. Let's say you have a statistics question that asks about range. You're like, well, could all the data points have been the same? And maybe my range is 0. Did they ever state something that cannot happen?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What's the like normal case that everybody's going to think of? And certainly try that case first, because just set your baseline. That's like your understanding. I'm trying to understand what's going on in this problem, but then start getting out there. Like, what are the weird numbers, the weird cases, the unusual things that people will forget about?
Oh, interesting. Because I actually like to test the weird case first.
Do you really? Okay.
I love testing the weird case first, because that just gives me this like, okay, this is like the outer edge of what could happen.
Okay, now I have a question for you. Remember our first question from the beginning? Are you a math person or a non-math person? Which one are you?
I thought I was a math person until I took the GMAT for the first time, and then I realized that, wow, I may be not as much of a math person as I got. My undergrad degree is in chemical engineering.
Okay. So you've got both of us represented here, because Chris is the math person. My undergrad degree was biology, so technically STEM, but I would describe myself as a verbal person, not a math person.
Yeah.
So
like
we've got.
I'm only somewhat joking when I tell my students I've studied more kinds of calculus than most people know exist. Like, that's so much mathematics and chemical engineering all the time. And then I took this test and I was like, what the hell? I thought I was good at math.
That's fantastic. I love that. So it's really interesting. So I'm gonna guess. I can say whatever I want, right? Let's have the hypothesis.
Yeah.
I like to try the basic case, like the normal case first, because I'm not a math person. Like, I prefer the verbal sections of this test. So I don't feel comfortable going straight to the weird case. I'm like, I need that normal first case just to understand what's going on, to understand the story, where you're leapfrogging that because you really are a math person. So you can go straight to the odd case or the weird case. How often do you go back and then do the normal case?
It depends on whether I am in the data insight section or the quantitative section.
Okay.
If I'm in the quantitative section, if I try the weird case, I'm usually done.
Okay.
In the data insights section, if I'm trying the weird case, I then normally have to try the normal case also.
Okay, because it just works differently. Okay, got it. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. Yeah. Super interesting.
The thing that also killed me most was, like, I took the test for the first time and I was like, algebra, all the things built, and I'm doing the little video filter, so you can't see my hands waving around, but just like all the algebra everywhere, yay! And I was like, oh my God, this is killing me.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about. Let's start to get into why would that happen if you know all this math? So the next question I have teed up for just to kind of set an understanding for everybody in the room, in case you don't know, is when and how can we use a calculator on this test? So just the basics. The quant section does not have any calculator whatsoever. The DI section does have a calculator, but it's really basic. So you can basically add, subtract, multiply, divide, take the square root. That's it. So like, you do have a calculator in that section, but it's pretty basic. This is a math test. You want to go to business school? Like, why don't we have Excel? Is this really the basics? So how does this play into, Chris, what we've been talking about in terms of textbook approaches?
So I view this test as, my theory is that the people who build this test, and when they originally designed the test, they were trying to build what I call a background agnostic test.
Okay.
In other words, if your background is very, very math heavy versus if your background was in art history or dance. I've actually worked with several tutoring students recently they were professional dancers for a while, and now they're wanting to go into something like that. Whether your background is very math heavy or not very math heavy, you should be able to build the same foundation for the quant section, and neither person should have an inherent advantage based in the quantitative section based on their background. And so they built a test where it is much more about mathematics decision making than it is about traditional algebra. So deciding when you should test cases and deciding which case to test first, or in some instances, deciding when a problem is just not worth the time at all. Coming back to James asking about time management, looking at some problems saying that's just never going to be worth it.
Okay, got it. And I see we've got a question coming in the chat about improving accuracy on could be or must be true questions. This is a great question. And is there a standard set of numbers, including extremes? I love that you asked this question. This is a fantastic question, because the answer is, yeah, there's a standard process here, and there are a standard set of numbers to be thinking about, or I'm going to call it like a standard set of characteristics of numbers. You can choose different numbers in that range. So first of all, a could be or must be true questions would be something like, if X is an even number, which of the following must be true? And then they'll give you 5 answer choices, and only one of those with a bunch of X's in them and other things. And only one of those answers will be true all the time, no matter what you choose for X, as long as you choose something that's even for X, since they gave that as a constraint up front. So when you're setting something like that up, first of all, you are going to test cases. We were talking about that earlier. And testing cases is really just trying some real numbers in the problem. You're trying multiple different ones. You're almost certainly going to have to try on this must be or could be true problem. You're going to have to try more than one set of numbers typically to knock out all 4 of the wrong answers. And then in terms of the standard set of numbers, so I do this visually myself during the test, Chris, and I'm curious what you do. I draw a little mini number line. And on that number line, I draw this like actually even before the test starts, when I have my scratch paper, but they're doing, the little instruction thing at the beginning. I draw my little number line like in a corner so that I can keep going back to it. On that number line, I place 0 and I place 1.
And
I put a little squiggle between 0 and 1, like above it, to remind myself that that range in between matters, so that fractions between 0 and 1 matter. Then I add 2. And then I basically add a little arrow above the line going to the right of the 2, and then an arrow to the left of the line for 0. And those are my visual reminders of these categories. So 0 and 1 are weird numbers. 0 and 1 are always potentially in the mix to try. I also want to remember 2 because it's an even number. So that's the 1 and the 2 is reminding me, like, try odds, try evens, depending on the problem. I want to remember between 0 and 1 because fractions do weird things. And then for me on the left side and the negative side, it's enough for me to just draw the arrow on the negative side to remind myself I need to think about all of these same things except negative. So negative integers, negative odd and even, negative fractions between 0 and 1. With other people, we'll draw it a little bit more carefully there. And the distinctions that I'm making here for these different categories are because they have different characteristics. Like when you square the number 2, something different happens than when you square the number 1. And that's different too than if you square the number 1/2. Like they're different characteristics. What do you do?
I don't draw the number line. I just have it absolutely drilled in my head. 1, 0, -1.
Okay.
And like
and all the stuff
1, 0, -1. 1, 0, -1. I have to test around those numbers.
Okay.
1, 0, -1. Always.
Okay.
Now it's to Ishan, I'm guessing. The could be true versus must be true. The thing that I would add to that, Stacy, is that I have to remember that every must be true is actually the search for the 4 wrong answers.
Yeah. Because the must be true will keep coming up true. So you only know you got it when you found the 4 ones that aren't true. Yeah. Totally true. Great question. Keep them up. Ask us more questions like that. Okay. So back to the calculator question. So you've got a calculator. I almost feel like the calculator is a double-edged sword on this, in the DI section. Yes, it's there. You can treat it like a crutch and just be like, oh, anytime I have a calculation, I can just pull up the calculator. I almost never use it, even though I'm not a math person. You'd think I'd be pulling it up on like every question. A, it's really clunky. It's just really annoying to use. And B, if I actually understand what's going on, like if it's a story and I've, set up the story or whatever, by the time I understand what's going on, usually I can just estimate, or there's some simpler calculation that I can do where I don't actually need to pull up the calculator. If I'm pulling up the calculator, it's usually because I'm like, oh, there's probably some easier way to do this, but I don't know what it is. And I can see some ugly numbers here. So I guess I'll just try that because I can't think of a better way to do this. What's your experience with the calculator, Chris?
My experience with the calculator is very much sort of a love-hate relationship with it. I love it when I need it, but oh man, it is just not the most, as you said, like it's very clunky.
It's extremely
So I am always trying to think, well, I guess I have to use the calculator on this one. In fact, when we were in our classes, I remind my students every single time, now keep in mind, some of these problems would fall into the data insights section, so you would have a calculator here. I have yet to have a student ever tell me in class they pulled out the calculator and used it.
It's, again, like, I almost, if I'm going to the calculator, I almost feel like, okay, I'm not setting this up right, or I'm missing something. And Pooja's asking, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, there's one problem I can think of where, yes, I definitely go to the calculator. It's very
in general. Yeah, in general, I don't use it much. Pooja's asking a great question. So like me, Pooja's a non-math person. And so if you take too much time in a question, it means we lack fundamentals. That's one possibility for taking too much time in a question. So if you take too much time in a question, it could be that there's some sort of foundational or fundamental math stuff that you're struggling with, or you don't know well enough. And so you're taking too long to work through the math on it. Yes. Another way to take too much time in a question is because you actually do have it and you are trying to solve it in like the brute force or the textbook way that we're talking about, the way like a teacher in math class in school would have told you, hey, here's how to solve this problem. And the questions are designed not to be done easily that way. They're designed to like waste your time that way, basically. So you could actually have that same problem by knowing too much. And by trying to do this, like by trying to do it too much, the textbook way, I'll call it. The third way is what I call the stubbornness gene that all of us possess, which is like,
that's me,
right? Which is like, I know how to do this. I studied this last week or last month or whatever. Like, I know I did this before, but my brain's just blanking right now. I can't remember. But you get stubborn and you won't let it go. And so that's that's a psychological reason for spending too much time, because you don't know it, but you're not just letting it go in the moment. And there I'll say, I love now on the new version of the test that they allow us to bookmark questions and you can come back at the end of the section, because that is a built-in way to tell yourself, look, sure, I did this 3 weeks ago and I should know how to do it, but it's not coming right now. I'm blanking right now. So I'm going to bookmark this and just leave it for the end of the section. And it's a good way to get yourself to just pick something, move on right now, and not get caught up in that. So just, you got to train yourself still to do that, because psychology can be really hard to overcome when you're taking this test. But yes, like check and see whether it's one of those things. If it is a fundamental issue though, yes, you definitely have to solve that. If you've got any holes in your foundational math skills, then it's going to be tough to get a really top score while that foundational hole exists. So definitely address that, but don't expect that to take care of your time management issues. You'll just have different time management issues later.
I was about to say, I love unfortunately, what I would say is misplaced optimism of there won't be any time management issues once I work on the fundamentals.
I wish that were true.
Yeah, no.
Chris and I have scored in the 99th percentile or the 100th percentile on the GMAT multiple times. We have time management issues every single time we take the test. Yeah. Because it's an adaptive test. They just keep giving you harder and harder questions. There's always time management.
You have to be able to look at those problems and say, I am just not going to do that right now.
Mm-hmm. Yep. They will find your limit. The test is designed to find your limit, and it will. It can keep going. So it will find your limit. And actually, this is a design of the test as well. So back to that quantitative reasoning thing we were talking about earlier. Chris, I was really interested to hear your theory about the setting the baseline for people who have math backgrounds and don't have math backgrounds. I'd never thought about it that way before. I wouldn't be surprised at all if you're right. The way that I've always thought about it basically is, this test is for business school. It's not for a math graduate degree or an engineering graduate degree. It's for business school. In business school, no one's ever going to make you do math on paper without a calculator. Actually, you're going to have Excel available to you all the time. Yeah. You have all these advanced tools available to you. What they really want to know for business school is, can you be sitting in a classroom, or by the way, eventually in a meeting in a corporate boardroom, and people are talking about the financials or the fundamentals or marketing stats or anything, where stats are used everywhere in business now, right? And can you listen to that conversation and be able to not just understand what people are talking about, but to be able to go from that and be like, oh, okay, so we're slipping on this metric by X% roughly. I'm just estimating in my head because I can't pull out Excel and model it right now in this meeting. And that, here are my hypotheses about what's going on and how we can fix it. Like, you actually have to be able to think logically about math in the moment while you're having real world meetings and conversations with people. So that's what they're really training for on this test. And by the way, part of that is to say, you know what, this is not a good use of our time in this meeting right now. We should move on. So they're making you do it on the test too.
Yeah. I mean, it says I'm currently struggling with word problems, eating a lot of time. And that'd be one of the situations where you have to look at someone and say, this is not going to be worth my time.
Yeah. And I'll say in general, you are going to, everyone's guessing on at least one question in every section, unless one section is just maybe not in your section of absolute strength, right? But if it's a section, I would argue everybody's guessing on at least one in DI, because DI is just brutal for time management. It's really, really hard. But on the quant and verbal, probably whichever section is your weaker of the two, you're probably guessing on at least one and maybe a couple of questions. So the way to think about it is not like, oh, I'm going to do my best in every question and then run out of time on the last 2 or 3 or 4 questions. Think about it as, I'm going to have to guess on at least a couple of questions. I want to retain as much control as possible over my destiny on this test, which includes controlling where I guess. I don't want to be forced to guess at the end just because I ran out of time. I want to choose the couple of hardest questions as I see them as I'm going through the section and cut myself off a lot earlier so that I can actually get to those questions at the end of the section. And I'll say, in terms of where you're going to experience the hardest questions in a section, it's typically not at the end. It's typically somewhere in the middle. By the end of the section, the test has really honed into your scoring level. And so you're not going to see as big swings in terms of both higher and lower difficulties as you are earlier in the section. So it really is hurting yourself if you are running out of time at the end, because chances are those are questions that you have a pretty decent shot of getting compared to some of the ones earlier in the middle of the section that are just way, way too hard. Chris, anything?
James asks.
Yeah.
Actually, I want to go to one of the questions in the chat.
Go for it.
How important are the first few questions? Should we obsess with them? I will tell you the thing that I tell all of my students. I missed question number 1 in my quant section on my official test, in my most recent one. And it was a quant section one, question when I looked at it, and I looked at it for about 45 seconds, and I was like, don't do this, Chris. You know better than this. Don't do this. Don't
spend 7 minutes on the one question.
and D means done, and I moved on, and I don't think I even went back to it.
Okay, reveal. What was the score? What was the score?
Oh, goodness.
Do you remember your total score?
Sorry?
Your total score, your overall score for the entire test.
Oh, total score is 725 or 735. I forget which.
Okay, so 99th percentile.
Yeah.
Missing the first question in the quant section.
Yes. And I think my overall quant score was an 87 or an 88.
Okay. So yeah. And that's not to say that the early questions are, setting the baseline. If you got the first 3 or 4 questions wrong, then yeah, you'd be digging yourself a pretty deep hole. The key thing, but this is the hard thing to tell, is the easier questions. But the question is, which questions are the easier questions? If you miss an easier question, that is going to really hurt your score. If you miss a hard question, that doesn't hurt your score. It just doesn't lift your score to the level of whatever if you had gotten that really hard question right. I'll also mention that there are experimental questions on the test. You don't know where those are going to fall. The first question could be an experimental question. That they really can show up anywhere on the test. So let Chris be our guiding light. That must have been really hard to do, Chris, on the very first question. Yeah, don't obsess about the first few questions. Don't obsess about every question when it first popped up on the screen gets consideration. If it looks like a question you can do in a reasonable amount of time, give yourself that time. If it doesn't, bookmark it. If you think that you want to come back to it later, just bookmark it, let yourself guess, and move on. And Pooja, you're mentioning, like, I've seen that people who scored above 700 are math geniuses. Well, I've scored above 700 and I am not a math genius. I am definitely not a math genius. Yes, there's probably, I know, Chris, you said at the beginning, like, they don't want to give any inherent advantage to people who are math people or not math people. Yes. Okay, fine. There's some inherent advantage to somebody who really is great at math. Just like if you're taking a test in a certain language, there's an inherent advantage to somebody who speaks that language as their first language. There's always going to be a little bit of that going on. But there really are possibilities here to do well, even if you're not a math person, to do well on the math portions of the test. I think what you're really going to have to do, though, is what I've done, which is lean into this. I'm estimating, I'm testing cases, I'm using real numbers to try to understand what's going on. I'm putting myself, if they give me a story, I'm putting myself into the story and pretending it's me doing whatever it is so that I can better understand the story that's going on. When they switched over to the new version of the test and I went in and took it for the first time, I was so surprised to actually find it the quant section a little bit easier than I had ever found it before. And when I say easier, not because the math itself was easier, but because more of the questions allowed me to approach them the way that I was just describing, where I really didn't have to do like the super textbooky number crunching, brute force, whatever. I could do a lot more of I call them test taking strategies as opposed to textbook strategies. I was able to lean much more heavily into those. And I actually scored higher percentile wise on the quant section than I had scored on the old version of the test in like the previous 3 times that I had taken it. So you can do it. It takes some work to train your brain to do that. But the great news is training your brain to take the test that way or approach the test that way. I actually recommend that everybody do this, even math people, because this is how business school works. And this is how business works. Nobody's in the middle of a meeting whipping out a pencil and being like, wait, let me write the equation for our profit this month. Like whatever. You're not doing it that way. You are thinking logically about the topics. You are thinking real world about the topics. So it's going to help you in B school and in your career to train yourself to do that right now while you're getting ready for this test.
I also wonder if some of it, like the math people versus not math people, as we've taken to describe people in this rather presumptive method while we're talking here. I think it maybe as well, just sort of there's an emotional safety net for math people, because math people who just, you always studied a certain type of math and you never lost comfort with that. And then there'll be some problems that land within that safety net for you. And you feel more comfortable with it and you've always felt comfortable with it. And I think that there's a psychological aspect to that as well that just at least needs to be mentioned.
Yeah, I agree with that. And it's the same thing as if you're taking, so I've taken tests in English and in French. English is my first language, French is my second language. I feel way more comfortable that I can like figure out my way on an English language test, even if I'm not quite sure what the question's, asking about, or I feel a little uncomfortable with it. When I'm taking a French language test, it's like, I feel a lot less confident. I've never taken a French-based math test. That would be interesting. That actually, I feel like we've addressed our next 2 questions, but I'm going to bring them up anyway, which is the next question is, I am a math person. Why is the math on this test killing me? We've already talked a bunch about this, but Chris, what would you say is like the biggest take for somebody who's sitting here listening to us right now, who falls into this category? What's the one thing they need to take away from this conversation to help them get over this?
Stop doing algebra. I mean, obviously that is a far more of a universal statement, like not literally stop doing algebra ever, but be aware that the majority of the questions aren't built with algebra as the optimal solution path. And so really lean into this idea of what can I do that isn't the build the equation, solve for the variable mentality, and step away from that.
I love it. And I'll add to that. The way that I think they suck you in to do that is if the question's an easier one, you will see some easier questions, right? And if the question's an easier one and you feel really comfortable with your algebra, then yeah, it actually can be quick and easy to just toss it into an equation or whatever and solve. And since it works on the easier ones, it's giving you this positive reinforcement that you want to keep doing it. But as you get things right and the questions get harder and more complex, that's where it's going to come back to kill you, basically, if you don't make that mindset shift. So ideally, you're going into this test having all the tools, all the skills and strategies at your disposal so that you can choose when to apply which. If it's an easier question, I have no problem with my students default, like just going ahead and doing the algebra if they feel totally comfortable with the algebra. The second it becomes like, the algebra is starting to look a little annoying. Should I do the textbook approach or should I do the test taking approach? Most of the time, the answer is if you're even asking that question, you should be using the test taking approach.
Yeah.
We got a question coming in about the section order of the test. and where to put your strongest section versus your the other sections. I do think this is individual, and so definitely test this out during practice tests. I don't put my strongest section last because by then my brain's pretty tired, and I want to get the most points that I can out of my strongest section. So I think, Chris, I'd like to know what you think here, because I think I think we could have a good debate about whether it should go first or second. My own preference is to put my best section second. I want to put first the section where I think I'm going to need the most mental energy, which for me is the DI section. My second section is verbal, because verbal is where I can I can get a little bit of a mental break because it's my strongest section. So I don't have to think quite as hard. So I'm separating my two harder sections by that strong section in the middle. And B, I'm not too tired yet. So I'm not going to be making careless mistakes in that section simply because I'm starting to get tired. And that leaves me with quant as my last section. What do you do, Chris?
I actually normally leave my strongest section to the end.
Do you? Oh, wow. Right after I said we shouldn't do that. Okay, why?
I know. It is because my strongest section is so much stronger than the other two.
Oh, okay. And so you don't feel like there's an issue in terms of being mentally tired or anything like that by the time you get to it?
Oh, there's absolutely an issue with being mentally tired. Like let's not ignore that. You are going to be mentally tired toward the end of the test. But I'm so much more comfortable in my, which by the way is verbal. I'm so much more comfortable in verbal than I am in quant and DI. Now that's changed a little bit. It's changed a lot actually. But I've always been so much more comfortable in verbal that even though I am tired, I still don't feel the same stress. And so I am okay with being tired in the verbal section more so than I would be with the quant and the DI section.
And you mentioned that had changed. Is that because of the DI getting added to the total score? Is it because they dropped grammar from sentence correction or from verbal, and maybe you felt comfortable doing those? Like, what was the change?
It's actually because I made peace with how many questions I can burn in the quantitative section and still get a good score.
Oh, okay. That's super interesting.
I used to think that I needed to try every single question in the quantitative section. And then I realized that I did not have to try every single question in the quantitative section. And then I started exploring the limits of just how many questions in the quant section can I just metaphorically make a rude hand gesture at the screen, click an answer choice, and move on, and still get a good score.
Don't actually do that during your test. They are video.
I metaphorically rude hand gesture at the screen.
Just disclaimer.
And it turned out to be more than I thought.
Interesting.
I've actually scored 85 on the quant section, burning 1 out of every 3 questions in the section.
No way.
Yes.
This was on a practice test or the real test?
Practice test.
Okay, because you were experimenting with different things.
Because I was experimenting.
Yeah.
I would not feel. My anxiety would skyrocket so high if I literally forced myself to burn essentially 1 out of every 3 questions in the quant section. That would just destroy me.
Okay, now
even though I know it can work.
Right. When you did that experiment, were you selectively choosing like, oh, this looks like the hardest one among this group, or were you literally just like question 3, question 6, question 9, like you held to like a pattern that you burned it?
I've done it in different ways actually. So in most of the way that I normally do it, I am choosing which ones, and I actually very often do this live in front of classes. I try to do this live in front of a class once in every 9 sessions, and I am just choosing which ones to burn based on how awful they seem in the moment.
Okay.
And that has led to some instances where I don't burn any until like question 8, and then I burn 3 or 4 in a row.
Wow. Okay. So even then.
Yeah. Okay. I've also done it where with the tutoring student once, where because the tutoring student was so resistant to that idea, I was like, listen, all right, you get to pick. I'm going to let you pick out of every 5 questions. You get to pick one and say, Chris, you have to get this question wrong. Not just you have to burn it, you have to get it wrong.
Oh, so you did enough to make sure that you got it wrong. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so it's like just, and so I've done it either way. And so long as when you start a problem in the quantitative section and you get about halfway into your work, if you are like 90% confident you're going to be able to finish it and get it right, you can burn so many other questions.
Wow.
And once I made peace with how many I could burn in the quantitative section, that changed a lot.
Like you proved it to yourself through doing it multiple times. Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Super, super interesting. Okay. And our next question, which again, we've been addressing this since the beginning, is just, I'm not a math standardized test person. Now what do I do with this? I really do think all of this comes down in the end to, I think both of these groups need to be doing the same thing, which is on math-based problems in the quant section or in the DI section, you're looking for the business way to do it. You're not looking for the school textbook way to approach it. That's going to help you on actually getting the thing right and in doing so in a reasonable amount of time. It's also going to help you, by the way, make that business decision of like, oh, look, this is a bad investment. I don't want to do this question. I really do think of every question when it pops up on the screen is like, this is an investment. Someone has literally just knocked on my door and been like, hey, want to invest in my problem? I'm looking at the problem being like, I don't know. I got to look first. I'm not just going to give you money because you asked me. I got to look at it first and evaluate. In that first minute, 45 seconds to a minute that I'm looking at the problem, I'm not in. I'm like, I'm just looking at you and deciding whether to invest. But my default is not, oh, I'm going to invest in you unless I find a reason not to. My default is actually the opposite. My default is I'm only going to invest in you if I see a good reason to do so. So that mindset shift, I think everybody should be using that regardless of whether you consider yourself a math person or not, because it will help you to not get sucked into things that are just not worth getting sucked into.
Yeah. There's a quick question in the chat, which may just be a terminology question. Somebody typed in CAT versus GMAT. And if that's just a question on terminology, CAT is an acronym for computer.
It's not actually. There's an Indian entrance exam called the CAT. Yeah, exactly.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah, and we don't teach that exam. So yeah, we can't unfortunately talk to you about how to get ready for the CAT. Thanks, Abhijit.
Learn something new every day. I did not know that.
Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, it's something that's used in India.
Yeah.
And someone's asking about what would you consider the hardest questions in quant? So first of all, in terms of the difficulty level, they have hard questions and easy questions for every single topic at every single level. Like they can write any question as a really hard question or a really easy question. So in that sense, it just depends on what you happen to get on your test. And then the other half of it is what the second half of your question says, which says that you struggle with probability and permutation combination, which is just your own individual. We all have our own individual strengths and weaknesses. The tip that I have for you here is know how frequently things are tested, because that changes your study strategy. Probability is more common than permutations and combinations, combinatorics. Neither one of them is super common on the test. You're going to see a lot more like need to do linear equations, need to do stuff with percents and fractions than you are either probability or permutations combinations. And as Chris was just saying, you can actually get away with burning a lot of questions with not needing to answer every question correctly. And so those two categories, if you really struggle with probability and permutation combination, my best advice to you there and to anybody who's struggling with a category that's not super common on the test is learn the fundamentals. You never want to lose an easy question in any of these areas. So do learn the fundamentals so that if you happen to get an easier one, you can actually address it. If they give me something about flipping a coin 3 times, I know at a minimum, I can just like write that out. I can just write it out and do it that way. If they give me something about flipping a coin 82 times, okay, that's going to get a lot more complicated. And so now that might be one that I skip. So know the frequencies, and you can always ask. You can come onto forums, come onto GMAT Club in the forums and ask us, or if you're in a class or something like that, ask your teacher. But know that frequency. And for the stuff that's not very frequently tested, don't try to learn the super hard ones. Those can be one of the ones that you just burn.
Yeah. The one thing I would add for permutations and combinations specifically is if you look at the questions you've seen and establish benchmarks for what relative magnitude of answer choice you have for a given number of elements, you can make good benchmarking decisions there on which answer choices are more and less likely to be at least within the order of magnitude you're expecting. And you can narrow down your guessing field pretty substantially on a lot of those.
That's a great tip. I love that. You can do that on a decent number of questions, of different kinds of questions. Yes. That's awesome. All right. Our next question is, how do our math skills impact the DI section? Like what's going on with DI? Because DI is a little bit different. than the quant section. The DI section, if anybody's not familiar, DI stands for Data Insights. It's basically a mix of everything that appears in the other two sections. So it's a mix of quant and verbal, and it's got all kinds of different formats. So part of the issue with DI is literally simply learning all the different question types that appear in that section. You can have graphs, you can have tables, you can have a mix of those things. You usually have multi-part questions. It's just complex to learn the section itself. Chris, is there a different way that you either see it, think about, or approach dealing with math, specifically in DI type questions?
It depends on whether it's data sufficiency versus everything else.
Okay. Why?
Because data sufficiency has its own unique beast of very, very often the way they ask the question isn't the easiest way to think about the question.
Okay.
And so you've got to think about, okay, you've got to work with the problem itself, think about, okay, what is an easier way to think about this question?
Okay. So rephrasing, we call this in our classes, rephrasing the question. So what's the, it's true. Yeah. A lot of times the way they ask it, you're like, wait, what? And you have to figure out the better way to phrase the question. Okay. And then what about the rest of the questions?
Everything else, if it's math-based, I am leaning very, very, very heavily into building some type of chart, sketching out a chart on my paper to keep track of the information.
Okay.
And building that. And I do that in the quantitative section too, but with data insights, that's
with data insights, it sounds like
all that I do.
Okay. Yeah. Like data insights, you're always doing this. Where on quant, it's like if a problem lends itself to that, then you will. But it's not necessarily going to happen all the time.
Yeah.
Okay.
Whereas data insights, that's almost all the time.
Yeah. Visual. And data insights, by the way, everyone, was really built. They built them to mimic case studies. So when you get into B school, a decent chunk of at least some of your classes is going to be going through case studies, which are these 15, 20, 30 page studies around. It could be like a business facing a particular problem or whatever it might be. And you'll get all kinds of information in those case studies. You might get the financials. You might get data on what's been going on with their marketing spend. You might get a particular product issue that they're having, or bad reviews that they're getting, or a perception that they're getting from customers or from the broader industry. So you're getting all of this information that builds this whole story or picture around what this company is facing at some point in time. And then you're discussing that in class and doing a series of exercises and questions and problem solving and strategic planning and all of these things around what you're seeing in the case study. So the data insight section actually is the closest that you will get on any test, not just the GMAT, to what it's actually like to be in B school working on these kinds of things and discussing. And Chris, I think that dovetails nicely with what you just said, because that's what you would be doing in class. If you're reviewing a case study, is you'd be sketching this out, you'd be using the whiteboard, and we'd all be looking at it, and we'd be together trying to make sense of this data to be able to come up with like, what's the best strategy going forward. All right. Keep your questions coming. We're now to okay, so now what? What do we do with all the information to actually build a study plan? So we're going to talk about 3 different phases for your study plan. For the quant, or for this, it says quant, sorry, I should say like math-based really. So this is for both the quant and DI section, but for math-based type problems. And if you want something similar on the verbal side, again, we did that video already. That's waiting for you down in the description. So just click on that link to go see that. So the 3 phases are similar to what we've talked about in earlier videos. Your first phase is just the first few weeks. And this is really the foundational phase. You're focusing on the basics, and on the math-based side, that really is, there are a bunch of facts and rules and skills and just things that we need to know how to do. So in this part, in this opening phase of your studies, essentially, I highly recommend using our Foundations of Math ebook, our free ebook. So that you can find that on Amazon. It's 100% free. In that ebook, what I would do is try the end of chapter problems first. So you go to you're in chapter 1, don't read chapter 1 yet. Go to the end of the chapter, do a smatter, do 5, 6 problems just pulled from different sections of that end of chapter problem set, and use that to really diagnose, like, what do you need? Where do you feel slow? Where are you getting stuff wrong or making mistakes, even if they're careless mistakes? That really helps to focus you on what to do when you then go into that chapter and start learning from that chapter. There may be parts of the chapter where you need to go more slowly, where you need to go more quickly, whatever that might be, depending on your diagnosis.
one thing that I want to add to that, when you do that sort of sampling of questions in the foundations of math, my position is that foundations of math needs to be 100% accuracy in any given topic, unless it's something like you said something like 2 + 3 = 17, and you just wrote down the wrong number. Absent something like that. But if the actual mechanics of anything, if you missed any question that was based on like the mechanics of a problem, go back and get that. You don't want to be missing problem because of mechanics.
Yeah. And so that first couple of weeks, you're focused on just getting those foundations super solid so that you don't need to think about it. You can just do it, and you can do it without mistakes, without careless mistakes. The other thing I'll just I'll tell you is in that Foundations of Math book, it's called Foundations. It's either GMAT Foundations of Math or Foundations of GMAT Math. If you go on Amazon and search for Manhattan Prep Foundations of Math, you'll find it. It's free. It costs $0, and you want the most recent edition was published in 2024. So you're looking for that edition, the 2024 edition. It's like a 400+ page book. It's got all the basics. It's got tons and tons of problems in it. Please go use it. Like, we made it free on purpose because we wanted everybody to have like this baseline without having to pay anything and just go do it. The other thing I'll mention there, if you are a math person, we've got the math people and the non-math people in the room. If you're a math person, I still want you looking at this, because it's going to teach you not just how to do stuff, but it's going to teach you how to do stuff faster and on paper, because remember, you don't have a calculator in the quant section of the test. So this is going to really be what sets the foundation, not just for the actual rules and facts that you need to know, but it's going to set that foundation for how do I do this in just a quick and dirty, like this, the fastest, easiest way to do this, to use the least amount of time and the least amount of brain power while I'm taking this test. So definitely go take a look at that. At the same time, in that opening couple of weeks, you're definitely going to want to take a look at just the different question types that are on these two sections, the quant and the DI sections of the test. There's 6 different question types. So just learn what they are, how they work. If you want some free resources on that, we also, on our website, we have a free GMAT starter kit that takes you through all the basics for this stuff. And when you're done with that after 2, 3, maybe 4 weeks, depending on how much you're studying week to week, go take a practice test. And I would go take a free practice test from the official test makers. And that's your like baseline. That's your starting point. And now you'll know, you see like, okay, how much did I actually learn from everything I did the past few weeks? And where are my skills at right now? And then take that forward as you start to figure out the next phase of your studies. Chris.
Yeah. I think sorry, what was that?
I should say, anything you want to add to that open phase?
No, we're good.
And we're just popping up on screen like a sample idea of here's what you could do the first week. Here's how you could set up your studies the first week.
Actually, I lied. There is one thing I want to add. It looks like you only have 6 practice tests available to you on the official site. You actually have more than that, because they can be reset and repeated. And the paid ones, when you reset and repeat them, you do not see duplicate questions.
They've actually now done that for the free ones too. They added more questions.
Oh, good.
December, yeah. So now all 6 exams can be taken at least twice. So that's 12 exams. The 2 free ones, you can keep retaking them. You might start to see repeats after that, though.
Yeah. So you've got more than 6 practice tests available to you.
Yeah. You've got 12. And I actually wouldn't take 12. That's too many. Don't take a ton of practice tests. Learn between the practice tests. That's when you actually learn how to get better. Okay, so that's phase 1 of your studies, is fundamentals. Phase 2 of your studies is going to be the next like 2 to 10 weeks of your studies. So let's say you've studied for about 2 to 4 weeks so far. We're now getting to like weeks, 4 to 12 of your studies. This is upskill. This is where I'm actually getting better and lifting my score. Chris, what would you like? How would you talk somebody through setting up this part of their studies?
Well, you have to have that practice test first. Like we already mentioned that. And what I would recommend there is start with 80% improvement, 20% maintenance.
Like it.
So the idea is like pick in any like 5 study session regimen, 4 of those study sessions need to be areas where I want to get improvement. One of them needs to be an area that I already feel good at, and I want to stay that way.
Love it. For something like this, you're probably going to have to get into some paid materials. I'm not going to try to sell you anything, whatever. Go and look at everything that's out there. Look at our stuff, but look at everybody's stuff and see what works for you. But as you get into the higher level stuff, yeah, you're going to need something that teaches you like all the the math topics and strategies and all of that kind of stuff. And then 100% do what Chris was talking about, where you do have to have that maintenance built in. You're not just learning something and not coming back to it for 3 months, because by then you'll have forgotten about it. And the other thing I would add in this phase is every like 3 to 4 weeks, Chris, take a practice test.
I normally say 4 weeks in this stage.
Okay.
Yeah.
I can go with that. I think it depends a little bit on how much you're studying. Most people are studying like 10 to 15 hours a week. If you're doing something like that, maybe every 4 weeks. And you're taking that practice test to get a new read on your collective data. Like, is it working? Is what I'm already doing working? And what are my strengths and weaknesses to prioritize my next 4 weeks of my study plan? But B, you're also giving yourself that chance to, like, it's like if you're learning a sport, I like tennis, I play tennis. I'm not playing a match every day. A lot of the time I'm just going out and practicing, but periodically I got to play that match to figure out how to use all the moving parts together, use all the strategies together, get used to the fatigue of it, get used to the time management of it, all of those pieces. You want to be doing that fairly regularly. The mistake that I see people make here around practice exams is either they don't take a practice exam at all for like 3 months. Yeah. And that's a problem. You really need that data and you need to be building that experience. Or they're taking a practice exam like every week, but that's not enough time to really move the needle in this stage of your studies. There's too much to learn. So you want to make sure you're giving yourself good time between exams to really learn what you need to learn. So that's your phase 2. And then phase 3 is the last week to 2 weeks. We often tell people to take 2 weeks, but they usually don't. They often just take a week. And I call this stage peaking on test day. This is like peaking on game day. Up until this point, you're trying to upskill, you're trying to get better. What are my strengths and weaknesses? How do I lift my score? That last week to 2 weeks, it's really about, okay, my skills are what they are, and they're not going to change substantially in the next, week to 10 days. So what I need to do is I need to make sure that I'm setting myself up to have a great day on game day. So Chris, in that last week-ish, what do you tell your students about what's the most important thing or a couple of things to do to have a great day on test day?
Build a very strong division of problems that you look at and think, this is where I'm a Viking. I love this. And I'm going to get right into it. And the other strong division be problems that you look at and go, absolutely not.
Not getting sucked into this. Yeah, we call this a game plan.
Yeah.
Know your game plan going in of where you want to invest and where you don't want to invest based on a calm look at your strengths and weaknesses and knowledge versus that frenzied decision making during the test when you're stressed out. You got to know that before you get in there. That definitely. And the other thing I'll say is in this stage, the one thing I will let you continue to try to improve is careless mistakes. So in that last bit of the stage, don't be like, oh, I really hate combinatorics. Let me go spend all my time trying to get better at those. No, let them go. Those are going to be on your bail list. That's fine. But if there are still places where you've got little holes in your foundation or you're making little careless mistakes here and there, tighten those up. This is about, again, having a great day on test day. So those those points that are almost yours, you almost have them. You want to tighten those up and get those last few points before you get there testing.
I want to do one more thing for this. Please, for the love of all that is good and beautiful in your life, do not take more than one test a week. One practice test a week. Just don't do it.
100% agree. I
have seen quite recently, actually, someone take 3 practice tests within the week of their official test and their score dropped 60 points.
Because it's like running a marathon 3 days before you run a real marathon. You don't run a practice marathon right before you run a real marathon because all you do is tire yourself out.
Yeah.
It's a terrible idea. And the other thing I'll say is, again, if you take a practice test and you don't love the result, taking another practice test the next day isn't going to change it. You already have the data. Use the data to get better. All right, we are at time. Just a couple of things. So this is, as I mentioned at the beginning, this is the third part of our 3-part series on planning your GMAT studies. All 3 are linked in the description. Take a look if you haven't seen them all already. Tell us in the chat right now or in the comments if you're watching us later, what's one thing you learned today that you want to make sure that you're taking forward with you as you get prepped for your math-based studies. And then next steps, if you want to dig deeper into each of these sections and really understand what's there, again, we've got links for you in the description of a series that we did that dives much deeper into each of the sections of the exam and the content and what to do there. So all links are in the description. Let us know in the chat. If you have other questions, let us know. And happy studying. Good luck, good luck, good luck.